Are you obsessing over TikTok 1990s mall walk videos and the glory days of MySpace? Or maybe you're pining for the life of a trad wife in a picturesque 1950s suburb? Back in the good old days, you could be experiencing anemoia, or as I like to call it, secondhand nostalgia. It's that visceral, bittersweet ache for a time you never actually lived through. It's looking at a grainy photo of 1920s Berlin and feeling homesick, even though your only connection to that era is watching a Netflix series and seeing an off-Broadway production of Cabaret. Why are we like this? Why are we so obsessed with the way it was instead of the way it actually is? Strap in, I'm Amelia Speaks, and today we're looking at why nostalgia just ain't what it used to be. Before we get into the second-hand part, we have to look at the OG, nostalgia itself. There's been references to it as long as there's been writing. For what is perhaps the first recorded case of homesick vibes, look at the Bible. In the books of Samuel and Chronicles, King David is hiding out in a cave while the Philistines occupy his hometown of Bethlehem. He basically has a breakdown and sighs, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." David wasn't just thirsty, he was experiencing a wistful desire for the sensory memory of his childhood. He wanted the feeling of home. His soldiers actually risked their lives to break through enemy lines and get him that water. But when they brought it back, he poured it out on the ground. He realized he shouldn't try to relive his past. In 1688, a Swiss medical student named Johannes Hofer coined the term nostalgia to describe a literal physical illness, the palpitations, the anxiety, the weeping, which he observed in Swiss mercenaries fighting in distant lands. He classified it as a, quote, cerebral disease. Back then, they thought it might be caused by shifts in atmospheric pressure, or even by the unremitting clanging of cowbells in the Alps damaging the brain. By the 1800s, nostalgia had been fully pathologized and rebranded as a form of melancholia or depression. But by the 20th century, we saw a shift. It moved from a disease to a psychological state, often appearing as a way the mind deals with trauma. Today, some psychologists see extreme nostalgia as a symptom of mental illness under, quote, prolonged grief disorder in the ICD-11. The specific term anemoia didn't exist until John Koenig dreamt it up for his 2021 book, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. He defined it as, quote, nostalgia for a time you've never known. He based the etymology on the Greek anemos, wind, and noia, mind, referencing anemosis, the way a tree is warped by strong winds until it permanently leans backward into the gust. But academics were conceptualizing this second-hand nostalgia way before Koenig gave it a catchy name. In 1992, researcher Barbara Stern broke it down into two flavors: personal nostalgia, the way I was, and historical nostalgia, the way it was. Personal nostalgia is based on your own memories, the affective congruity of your past. Historical nostalgia, or anomia, is a cognitive history-seeking or story-building process. It requires imagination and empathy because you have to build a story about a world you never stepped foot in. This is what researchers Havlina and Hollick called collective or societal variants of nostalgia, where entire groups of people start longing for a, quote, zeitgeist they only know through movies, music, and old photos. It's essentially a, quote, romance with one's own fantasy, triggered by tangible objects and intangible presentations like food and film. Over the centuries, this led to a kind of Roman chic, classical architecture and idealistic newly formed nations basing their constitutions on the Roman Republic. However, I'd say Anemoia really came into its own with the Industrial Revolution. Imagine the 19th century. Everything is changing at breakneck speed. Factories are churning out smoke, the once pristine countryside is being paved over, and a new class of wealthy industrial elites is challenging the old world order. People started looking back at the Middle Ages as a golden age of spiritual purity and moral clarity. This is why we have neo-Gothic architecture. The Victorians were literally building fake medieval castles because they were unsettled by the cold efficiency of machines and alienation of urban life. They weren't looking for the actual Middle Ages. They skipped the plague and the serfdom. They wanted an escapist fantasy of knights and noble deeds. Finally, this medieval revival was a tangible synthesis of past and present used to cope with the harshness of progress. Back in the 1920s and 30s, America was roaring into modernity with automobiles, telephones, and radios. But that rapid change, followed by the painful crash of the Great Depression, made people question if progress was all it was cracked up to be. Suddenly, everyone was longing for the 1890s, the gay 90s. They reimagined that decade as a whimsical time of horse-drawn carriages, vaudeville shows, and pre-income tax wealth. Pop culture exploded with this stuff. Mickey Mouse's The Nifty 90s and a wave of Technicolor musicals like Meet Me in St. Louis. Why? Because life in the 30s was unstable and bleak, and the 1890s provided a calm before the modern world to hide in. Then we hit the 1970s. The 70s were traumatic. The 1973 oil crisis, skyrocketing inflation, and massive social shifts in race and gender relations. The Rust Belt was literally starting to rust as factory jobs disappeared overseas, and the largely white blue-collar workers couldn't earn that middle-class income that could buy a house, a car, and support a family all on a single income. So what did society do? It threw a 1950s-themed party that lasted decades. We got Happy Days, American Graffiti, and Grease. People looked back at the 50s as a time of Leave It to Beaver stability, where a single wage could buy a house, and morality was simple. This wasn't about the real 1950s. It was about the 1970s needing a romanticized and idealized image to survive the political mistrust and disillusionment of their own time. They wanted to dream about the good old days. If you're keeping track, we can identify 3 elements leading to a sense of anemoia. 1. Rapid change. Social, technological, or economic shifts that make you dizzy. 2. Perceived loss. The feeling that something genuine has been traded for efficiency. And 3. An idealized view of the past, seeing a past era through those clean borders that protect you from the rush of time. That brings us to Gen Z, the first digital natives. Research from the Human Flourishing Lab shows that Gen Z and millennials have way higher rates of historical nostalgia than boomers. We're currently in a massive analog revival. We're buying film cameras and vinyl records and obsessing over the early internet days of the 2000s. Why? Because we feel like we're losing something in our world of constant engagement and mediated loneliness. We look back at a world that, though it still had tech, felt more genuine, more authentic. We revel in what it was like to browse the web before an algorithm decided what we were allowed to see, or to flip open a phone that could only make a call. Is anemoia a sign we're all losing it? Maybe. To prepare to make this video, my girlfriend insisted we watch the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris. The main character is so obsessed with the 1920s that he travels back in time. Eventually, he realizes that every generation feels that its own time is unsatisfying and yearns for a golden age that never really existed. He calls it golden age thinking, the erroneous notion that a different time period is better than the one one's living in. Like King David, he chooses to live in the present. It got me thinking, is golden age thinking purely idealizing the past? Is it just a fantasy? I think it's more. If I wanted to be present at some seminal moment in London next weekend, I probably wouldn't guess where I should go even if something big really were happening. If I traveled back to America in 1969, I'd know to go to Woodstock. In Berlin in the 20s, I'd know to hang out in the nightclubs and cabarets. We understand the past in a way that we couldn't possibly know the future. Our understanding and idealization of the past is a way that we define ourselves and our own goals and ideals, and how they relate to the challenges in our own lives. For some, it might be the desire for a stable, happy home and a loving family. For others, it could be the need to live an authentic life, independent of social media chatter and algorithmic engagement. The impulse is the same. We take on elements of the past as we understand it to deal with the future. Here's the kicker. Recent research suggests Anemoia may be a vital psychological resource. A 2025 study in Scientific Reports and other recent research argues that nostalgia is an antidote to self-uncertainty. It boosts self-esteem, reduces loneliness, and provides existential meaning. The DSM-4 even suggests that nostalgia is a way of dealing with trauma, while the ICD-11 notes that nostalgia can influence how PTSD and bereavement are experienced. I think that secondhand nostalgia works the same way. When our world changes too fast, when we lose our jobs or our social connections, our brain retreats into the past to restore a sense of continuity and stability. Society is essentially doing this on a macro scale. Societies use secondhand nostalgia to process the trauma of living through periods of rapid change, whether it's the fall of ancient civilizations, the rise of industrial society, the decline of stable factory work, or even the coming of a post-industrial, hyper-digital AI information-driven culture. We see in the past what we have lost, and perhaps use that to shape our future. I, for one, have zero problems with Anemoia. If I want to spend my weekend in a full Elizabethan gown at a Ren fair, or dress in full Y2K gloss and pretend it's a 2004 music video, well, that's just my way of experiencing the now and defining my own future. Anemoia recognizes that as things improve, some things are lost. It's not about hating the present, it's about mourning the authenticity and simplicity that got left behind in the shuffle. It's a bittersweet longing that actually helps us stand our industrialized, algorithm-optimized world. We're all tourists in history, looking for our own reflection in the still waters of a past that feels safer than the rush of time. So keep your vintage typography and your wrong era playlists. Anything that helps you navigate the change is a win. I'm Amelia Speaks, and I'll see you in the next decade, or maybe the one from 500 years ago. Stay weird.